This is Jeffrey Jackson. He is a governing body member of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, back in 2015, Jehovah's Witnesses were called to testify in front of the Australian Royal Commission. It was this commission put together to determine the extent to which Jehovah's Witnesses were covering up child mistreatment, or CSA. This is an actual governing body member. It doesn't get higher up than this guy, okay? And he came on here and put his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth to Jehovah and lied to people's faces. Blatantly, bald-faced, lied to them. It was crazy. This is actually part 3. If you haven't seen the others, don't sweat it. This stands independently of the rest. I'll provide context if it's missing. But let's give this a listen, see what he had to say. And while we do, we're going to play some Breath of the Wild.
Now, one of the characteristics that we have identified, and I've spoken about it, and I'm sure you know this, that is manifest in the area of sexual abuse of children within institutions is the child's incapacity to tell an adult about what's been happening to them. You're familiar with that problem?
That is correct. I am familiar with that problem, yes.
Okay, let me just tell you, because it sounds like we're getting into the CSA stuff now. The real issue with Jehovah's Witnesses is not that there is CSA. You know, that's not the problem. I mean, it is a problem, obviously, but that exists in any organization, in any group of any population of people. This happens. It's somewhere in the vicinity of, 5% of the population, give or take, are people who are going to take advantage of children. And that needs to be rooted out and taken care of. They need to be protected at all costs. The problem with, say, the Catholic Church is that they were hiding it, covering it up, moving people from parish to parish so they could avoid prosecution. The problem with Jehovah's Witnesses is that they have this ass-backwards rule that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever that protects people who are perpetrating this. They say, don't call the police, call the service branch, call the elders, call our lawyers. Why? No, it should be in the book, call the police. Don't call the service branch, don't call the governing body, don't call anybody, call the cops. There's no excuse for this. That's the problem. I get that there are going to be cases of this. Why don't they get that? It's going to be widespread if they don't deal with it.
I've described it by reference to the admonition that was certainly prevalent when I was a child, that children are to be seen but not heard. You understand?
Mm-hmm. I do understand.
You're familiar with that concept?
Yes. Yes.
Is it relevant to Jehovah's Witnesses?
Your Honour, in our publications, obviously I can't give you examples now, but we'd be...
Jehovah's Witnesses are a very conservative group with traditional values and ideals. So I would say that saying children should be seen and not heard is relevant to Jehovah's Witnesses to some degree because they're traditionalists, conservatives. But I don't think that it was like... to my knowledge, I don't remember ever being taught that personally. Maybe it is a widespread issue in the religion and I just overlooked it. But they do have really weird backwards views on children and how they should act and, you know, the whole 9 yards.
Is it relevant to Jehovah's Witnesses?
Your Honour, in our publications, obviously I can't give you examples now, but we'd be very happy to do that. One of the key things we try to help parents to do is to encourage their children to communicate with them. As a missionary in the South Pacific, the cultures in the South Pacific definitely follow what Your Honour just said. If children are being disciplined or counselled, they're not supposed to speak at all. And over again, we encourage parents, no, children need to express themselves. They need to feel the love so that they can do that.
Okay, that's not really exactly accurate. I mean, like I said, they're traditionalists. Spare the rod, spoil the child. If you're not hitting your kid to keep them in line, then you're not doing it right. So I don't know that it's strictly part of doctrine, but the traditional ways, the traditional way of viewing it, are definitely part of doctrine for sure. And I feel like he's like twisting that around and making it look different than it is.
You've got the Bible there. If you go to 1 Timothy chapter 3.
Why do they keep saying 1 Timothy, 1 Corinthians? I don't understand. It's 1 Corinthians, 1 Timothy.
Yes.
Verse 4, there's a discussion of a man presiding over his household, having his children in subjection. Now,
yeah, 1 Timothy, that whole area of Timothy was all about women being quiet and children being in subjection and blah, 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 blah. You know, men should run the household. They're the greatest and the best and the smartest and the coolest and blah, blah, blah.
what does that mean?
That's a very good question, Your Honour. Biblically speaking, the word subjection infers respect and a willingness to comply with direction. It does not...
Your Bible then provides a reference back to Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4.
That is correct.
Which imposes the obligation on fathers to bring their children up in the discipline and admonition of Jehovah.
I actually just talked about this on my main channel recently. Or it may not have released yet, I'm not sure. But Jehovah's Witnesses did a video, a Caleb and Sophia video, about discipline. And, yeah, this is it right here. Discipline is love. And, yeah, it's all about how you should, spare the rod, spoil the child stuff. Like you should put braces around them to keep them straight and stuff.
What's the discipline of Jehovah?
So, Your Honour, the original language word there, discipline, it indicates a process of teaching, educating, making a disciple.
Oh, interesting. Okay, now this is something that we can check. Ephesians 6:4. Let's look this up. So there's something called the interlinear version of the Bible. Interlinear version gives you exact word-for-word translations of the words that are used and the context in which they're used in other areas of the Bible. So right here is the word. Ephesians 6:4, it says, this is an exact word-for-word translation. I'm not even sure how to read this exactly, but this is just the words laid out as they are. And fathers, not provoke the children of you, but bring up them in the discipline and admonition of the Lord. Those are the exact words. So the word discipline here, let's check and see. It's paideia is what that word means, or is how that word's pronounced, paideia, or something like that. Here are some examples of how it was used in other areas of the Bible. To bring them up in the discipline and instruction, up in the nurture and admonition, in the discipline and admonition. All discipline for the moment. No chastening for the present. All moreover discipline for indeed. Okay, so it looks like here are some other examples of words and the context in which they're used. Discipline, chastening, discipline, nurture, discipline. Those are the context in which the word was used in other areas of the Bible. And what was it that he said exactly? Let's just listen to his description. I think he said teaching, right? That to be a disciple, that's not what it says. That's not what it means at all. He's simply wrong here. He's supposed to be like some language expert, right? Is he lying or incorrect or what?
An admonition of Jehovah. What's the discipline of Jehovah?
So, Your Honour, the original language word there, discipline, it indicates a process of teaching, educating, making a disciple.
No, it meant to nurture in that context. Not to make a disciple. It meant to nurture or chasten.
Well, from that reference in Ephesians, your Bible takes us back to Proverbs chapter 13.
Dude, I love how they say that word, 13. That's fantastic, isn't it? 13. I love it.
Verse 24.
Proverbs 13:24. Yes.
And the exact quote is, "Whoever holds back his rod hates his son." What does that mean?
Spare the rod, spoil the child. Yep, I heard that a lot when I was little.
So, Your Honour, you'll notice there's an asterisk there on the term rod, and you see the footnote?
Yeah.
Discipline or punishment. So, in the application of this, the term rod is used as a symbol or a metaphor to indicate the authority to give some punishment. For example, in a modern-day setting, my father could say to me, I don't go to the movies because I had broken some of the rules of the home.
So it's not about inflicting corporal punishment then?
It is, actually. Look, I told this story in that video I did on discipline with Caleb and Sophia, but when I was little, my dad used to have this paddle. It wasn't a 2x4. It was like a 2x8 maybe. It was probably 2 inches thick, and it was a wide piece of wood, right? And it was long, too. It was, I don't know, maybe 2 feet long, somewhere in there, and maybe 1.5 feet long, and it had tape around it, like where he would grab it as like a makeshift handle, you know? And if you did something wrong, you knew you were getting the paddle every single time. It was not pleasant. And in fact, you know, he hit me so hard one time, my ass was just black and blue. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't even go to school for a week. And that's when they started homeschooling me. But anyway, when my brothers left, when they moved out, you know, grew up, got married and whatever, they designed a new paddle because the old one was just busted up and destroyed. And they, like, took red pen and drew, like, blood droplets on it and stuff because they thought it was funny, apparently. Anyway, I remember one time I broke some rule. I don't even know what it was I did. And my dad used to keep the paddle on the top of the fridge, and I just kind of pushed the paddle up, you know, over, and it fell down behind the fridge. They looked for it for hours. He used his hand after that, which is less pleasant, trust me. But anyways, yeah, spare the rod, spoil the child is a very important fundamental piece of Jehovah's Witness beliefs. You can't not hit your kid. You must. And if you don't, you're failing Jehovah. So that's kind of their position on the whole thing. Let's see how he reacts to this, because he has a vested interest in making these people believe that they don't believe in corporal punishment. They don't, which is paddling, by the way. They don't believe in spanking kids. They don't believe in when they discipline kids. He wants people to think that what he means when he says that is just like putting them in timeout, because he knows how it looks to the outside world. It looks bad.
So it's not about inflicting corporal punishment then?
It absolutely is not about inflicting.
That's weird, because he just followed the reference notes in their Bible back to the verse about paddling kids. So it definitely is. He just followed a logical line, and they're denying that line exists now.
Inflicting corporal punishment then?
It absolutely is not about inflicting corporal punishment.
It would have been when first written, wouldn't it?
How people applied it back then at that time, of course, is open to question.
No, it's not open to question. We know exactly how it was interpreted at the time. But I guess the point he's making now is that they take things in their cultural context, right? They're willing to ignore certain verses or interpret them differently or live life in a different way than originally intended in the Bible, because they realize that it doesn't really apply to modern day problems. And that's fascinating that this judge, I assume he's a judge, just got this guy to admit that. That is really interesting to me, that he admits that there are like different situations in which you should do different things. Because he just asked him if it's appropriate to take like the cultural context that existed all the way back then and apply it to today. And he said, yes. Well, here's a prime example of him not doing that, denying that he does that, even though he does. That is really interesting to me.
Well, what you're telling me, as I understand it, is that your religion, your church, is prepared to interpret the Bible having regard to contemporary social attitudes and standards. Is that right?
Obviously, Your Honour, we need to take that into consideration, but the primary responsibility we have is to think, what does Jehovah God mean by this?
And that is when it really boils down to what the governing body believes about things. It's not about what Jehovah thinks. It's what they think, because they believe they speak for God. They're God's spokesman on earth in their mind. So whatever they say is what Jehovah believes in their mind.
And we look at other scriptures. One of the problems that many folk have when they read the Bible is they take one verse and they assume it means something out of context or not in reference to other scriptures. So for our understanding, Jehovah has said that children should be raised in a loving environment. Jesus was raised in such an environment.
Well, I've taken you to the way your own church constructs the biblical references, which, as we've noticed, takes us back to Proverbs. Correct?
Dude, I love it. This judge is owning this guy.
That is correct.
But what you've given us is the understanding which your church now has about how that's to apply in contemporary society. Is that right?
He just got him in a logical trap, because earlier he said, cultural context, political context, decide, it doesn't matter. What matters is what the Bible says. And he just found an example of him disagreeing with that position, even though he doesn't. He openly disagrees with it because he doesn't want to look really, really bad by saying he thinks you should beat kids, which he most definitely does.
That's a good question. Obviously, I can only speak about what we understand this to mean now, but I would argue the case that even back in ancient times, God did not have in mind for children to be beaten up in a bad way.
Does your church accept corporal punishment of children?
Yes.
Our church accepts the family arrangement and expects that parents have the responsibility to discipline and raise their children.
Just say yes. The answer is yes. My dad used a paddle. They believe in using paddles. Yes.
That doesn't answer my question. Do you accept corporal punishment?
In our literature, I think you'll see time and time again, we've endeavored to explain that here, discipline is referring to more a mental...
No. Well, okay, fine. You know what? If he wants to take that route, okay. That specific verse in Ephesians, maybe, it was used to refer to like chastening or nurturing, right? But it referenced back to the Proverbs verse about beating children. How can he say this with a straight face? He's lying and twisting things around and making it appear different than it actually is, and he knows he is. This is a governing body member, okay? This may not mean much to, like, the average person because they don't fully understand the context that's being laid out here. But to Jehovah's Witnesses watching this, watching him blatantly flat out lie to people's faces, they know exactly what's going on now.
Point of view.
I regret to tell you, you're still not answering my question. Do you accept corporal punishment?
No.
You don't?
That's a lie! That's a blatant, bald-faced lie! Holy shit, dude! He's straight up lying, and he knows he's lying. It's mandated. It is a requirement. You must hit your kids in Jehovah's Witnesses religion. It's a fundamental piece of the religion. If you do not, you're not following Jehovah's instructions. That's how they view it. This is a lie. Jehovah's Witnesses watching this know that was a lie and don't really know how to reconcile it. They lost so many people after this came out because they know. They know that he's flat out lying to people's faces. Under oath, by the way, swore to Jehovah God that he would tell the truth and then lied to their faces.
Do you accept corporal punishment?
No.
You don't?
Not personally, no. And not.
Oh, Okay, we're not talking personally. I don't give a shit what you think personally. What I care about is if it's mandated by the religion, and it is. And by the way, he would accept corporal punishment personally if it's mandated by the religion, because he is the religion.
You don't?
Not personally, no. And not as an organisation. We don't encourage it.
Yes, they do. But you notice what he said. They don't encourage it. They do encourage it. It's a mandate. But that's not what was asked. It was asked if they accept it, if they're okay with it. Not if they encourage it, if it's a mandate.
But do you prohibit it?
Our literature has pointed out that the true way to discipline children is by educating them, not giving corporal punishment.
This is just a flat-out lie. He's just lying right now.
Your Honour, I can only tell you the spirit behind our writings.
Now, I'm sure you know that one of the problems for survivors revealed by their evidence in this very hearing is their concern about having to approach men within the church to tell their story and then have that story assessed and judged by men alone.
Yeah, so here's another problem with the instructions for what happens when somebody experiences CSA, when they're a survivor of CSA, child mistreatment, right? When that happens, it's mandated that the victim, the survivor of this CSA, is required to confront their abuser and sit in a room with them and the elders, men, and accuse them to their face directly. You did this to me. That's a requirement. They must do that. And if they don't, the elders pretend it never happened. They forget it. It's like the two-witness rule. If you don't do that, they're going to leave it in Jehovah's hands, quote unquote. That's part of the rule.
Tell their story and then have that story assessed and judged by men alone.
Oh, and they have to sit in this room with the men. Dude, I'm really, really bad at this section all of a sudden. They have to sit in the room with the men and describe in vivid detail exactly what happened to them. Vivid detail. And they have to describe if they enjoyed it to any degree and all kinds of stuff. It's really, really bad. It's so bad that Jehovah's Witnesses lost multiple lawsuits, hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits because of how badly they handled it. That's how bad it is.
Within the church to tell their story and then have that story assessed and judged by men alone. Do you understand?
I do understand that, Your Honour.
Now, in the society in which you live and which I live, we have seen significant change, although perhaps not yet complete, in the role which women play in the decision-making and government of our society, haven't we?
We certainly have.
Yeah. And that's a reflection of a contemporary understanding of the role and contribution which everyone in our society can make to the common good, isn't it?
Yes.
So what he's saying is women are a part of our current society right now because we're all equals and we're all equally as capable of contributing to society. I think that's what he's saying. And this guy doesn't believe that. Jeffrey Jackson, governing body member, Jehovah's Witnesses, doesn't believe that. He doesn't feel that way. He thinks that women are, for all intents and purposes, worthless. They should have no role in leadership whatsoever because that's what the Bible says in 2 Timothy 2:12, I think, or 1 Timothy 2:12. I don't remember which. So tentatively he says, yes.
Yes.
And I'm sure you know of the concerns expressed by the women who have given evidence in this hearing about the confrontation and difficulty in that confrontation which they found in approaching a male dominant structure.
there are no women in positions of authority in Jehovah's Witnesses organization. So if somebody suffers at the hands of somebody else, CSA, a woman is dealing with the effects of this, there's no woman they can talk to about this. There's no other person. They have to sit in a room full of men and describe in vivid detail what happened. And I'm talking vivid detail. Their feelings and emotions through the entire experience and literally every step of the process. It's wrong on so many levels.
You understand that?
I do understand that, Your Honour.
Is there room for the church to change that?
That's a very good question.
So the question was, you understand how it's wrong to expect children or women or whatever to sit in a room full of a bunch of older men and describe the, attack that they survived. You understand that's wrong, and that could cause serious emotional damage and could lead to people not wanting to report this stuff at all, right? He says yes. He says, is there room to change then? Because this is obviously a way in which you should change. And his answer?
Church to change that?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it. Is there a chance to make elders women or make women elders? No.
That wasn't the question. At the very least, have them report these problems to the police rather than the elders. Elders shouldn't be adjudicating this at all. They should go to the elders and tell them, and the elders should call the police immediately. At best, honestly, the elders shouldn't even be a part of the equation. Somebody takes advantage of somebody else, send them to the cops, period.
No, there is no leeway there. But, Your Honour, if I could just mention...
Why is that? Can you tell me why that is?
Sure, yes. If we turn to first...
Is it because of a literal application of the Bible?
When it's convenient, yes. Literal application of the Bible when it's convenient for them.
Your Honour, it goes back to the theme of the Scriptures right from the creation of Adam, right through Israelite times to the Christian era. But in all fairness, may I just say something with regard to that?
Oh, certainly.
You see, the role of women in the Jehovah's Witness religion is a very dignified role.
Dignified, yeah. As women are to be in subjugation to men, that's so dignified, right? They're extra dignified because they get to be in subjugation to men. Other men only get to be in subjugation to certain other men, but women, they're in subjugation to all men. It's so dignified, right?
We don't make women, well, we certainly do not want women to feel like second-rate citizens.
But they are.
In God's view, men and women are equal. But
No, not in Jehovah's Witnesses' view. They're not.
Even people who fly airplanes realize you can't fly an airplane by committee. There has to be a pilot and a co-pilot. And that's the Bible arrangement. Not because of any lack of intelligence or lack of ability on the part of women. It is an arrangement that has stood the test of time.
Actually, it hasn't stood the test of time. It's been proven to be worthless over and over again, destructive. It's been proven over and over again to be counterproductive. It has not stood the test of time by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, within that arrangement, the Bible clearly states that a man does not have absolute authority over a woman, and a woman is a co-worker, a complement, the Bible refers.
Okay, he says they don't have absolute authority over women. Really? That's completely made up. This is another blatant, bald-faced lie that he's telling right now. The only way in which men do not have complete authority over women is in the sense that if the man is telling the woman to stop loving Jehovah or going to meetings, then the woman can separate from him. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, he has complete control over her, with very few exceptions.
So I think in the context of understanding how women are treated among Jehovah's Witnesses, I think if you investigate it further, you would see there are very many happy women in the marital arrangement.
I don't care how happy they are. Think about this. In Romania, Andrew Tate's in legal trouble right now, and this is the argument he keeps giving. he had a whole bunch of girls that were like working for him, right? As cam models, basically. And he was trafficking them. He was taking advantage of them. He was taking their money and keeping it for himself. And he keeps using this as an argument, like in court. Like, these women were doing it willingly. They were sending me their money because they like me and they want to. Unfortunately for Andrew Tate, consent is not part of the equation when it comes to human trafficking. And in the same vein, consent's not a part of the equation when dealing with destructive control or undue influence. Yeah, you can talk somebody into doing something that benefits you and hurts them. It doesn't mean that they made the decision in an informed way. That's why consent is not a necessary part of the equation. Doesn't matter if they consent or if they're happy or whatever. It's irrelevant. What matters is that they took advantage of people around them, period. So I don't care how many women purport to be happy in this organization.
Further, you would see there are very many happy women in the marital arrangement.
It used to be the case that all of our pilots were women, wasn't it? We changed
Pilots were women. Interesting.
that.
All of our pilots were, did we?
Were men.
All men? Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, but we're men, yes.
Yeah, we're men, and we've changed that now. And
Oh, I see. Okay. All pilots were men, and we've changed that. Now we have female pilots. Okay.
we have women who are pilots. Why couldn't the church accept that women can contribute to the decision-making processes, particularly in relation to allegations of sexual abuse brought forward by women?
The answer, Your Honour, is that we expect women to be involved in that.
No, they don't. This is another blatant, bald-faced lie. He's simply not telling the truth. No, women will not be involved in this process. It's men. It's men. They have to go to the men, the elders in the congregation, and tell them what happened in vivid detail. Women aren't part of the equation, ever. By mandate.
But in the actual role as elders within the Christian congregation, there is a very firm standard set there. There is no leeway whatsoever for that in the belief of Jehovah's Witnesses. But if I could mention, some of the reports that you've considered are from 25 years ago. And if I understand correctly from what little I heard of the Commission in the last few days...
I mean, they were started 25 years ago, but they're still in effect today, like right now. And he's the guy that can change it. Sure, they were from 25 years ago. Fix it. You can't complain that they're bringing up things from 25 years ago if they're still in effect and you have the possibility or the ability to change those things.
Mr. Spinks very accurately described that there has been more an awareness of Jehovah's Witnesses to make sure that any victim who has been a victim of a horrible crime does not be required to actually go before three men. We've made changes, Your Honour.
Talking about a judicial committee, that's three elders. And did he just say it's not required to go? Yes, it is. What's he talking about? This is another blatant lie.
Has been a victim of a horrible crime does not be required to actually go before three men.
Yes, they are. What's he talking about? They are required to confront their accusers. I'm sorry. They're required to confront the accused, the person that they're accusing of this. They most definitely are required, or it says leave it in Jehovah's hands. Nothing will happen.
We've made changes, Your Honour, because those changes in the actual technicalities of the policies don't change. They're not affected by the actual Bible principles, except the very important principle of showing love, empathy and concern and trying to avoid any form of trauma. And that's our desire. If it wasn't perfect before, which it wasn't, we've tried to change that. And we will make further changes when we consider the recommendations of the Commission.
Well, we'll come back to your process.
Okay, so interesting. He says they're going to make more changes. Well, this is, 8 years ago now. Did they? Did they make changes? We know. The answer is they did change one thing. Here's what they changed. It used to be that elders were expected to not involve outside authorities under any circumstances and go to jail if they were legally required to. Here's what they changed. Now, if they're going to be sent to prison, then they can, reveal what they know. Rather than go to prison, they're allowed to reveal what they know. That's number one. And number two, they said you can call the police if you choose. Not the elder, but the elder is supposed to tell the victim, if you choose, you can call the police. So those are the two changes. They can tell the victim that they can call the cops if they want, but the elder will not. I mean, obviously that didn't solve the problem at all. In fact, did it even do anything? Did it make any corrections to the problem at all? I mean, how many people's lives are saved now as a result of this?
The recommendations of the Commission.
Well, we'll come back to your processes later on. I'll leave you now with Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Just on the last point, Mr. Jackson, with regard to a survivor of sexual abuse having to make the allegation directly to the accuser, do you agree that in those circumstances, should a survivor have to make the allegation in the presence of the accused?
Right. That's part of their belief system. The accuser has to make the allegation in the presence of the accused. And seriously, a 6-year-old kid sitting in front of a big dude that has just threatened them and mistreated them, done something terrible to them. What's wrong with them, really? What's wrong with them? What's going through their heads?
I agree that it would be better for them not to do that unless the victim wants to do that.
Yes, well, that's why I phrased my question in the way that I did. And so
it's a requirement, and in fact, it's still a requirement right now.
I'll repeat it, that do you agree that in those circumstances the survivor should have to make the allegation in the presence of the accused?
In no circumstances should that ever be an expectation.
Sorry, I don't understand your question. Could you rephrase it?
Really? You don't understand the question? Come on. He's not even halfway believable.
Do you agree that there are no circumstances in which the survivor of a sexual assault should have to make her allegation in the presence of the person whom she accuses of having assaulted her?
I agree that that is the case.
And
No, he doesn't. You know how I know? Because he's the guy that writes the Elder's Manual, and that's not a part of it. And as a matter of fact, 5 years after this came out, they released a new version of their Elder's Handbook, and that's still nowhere to be found in the new one, 5 years later.
Presence of the person whom she accuses of having assaulted her.
I agree that that is the case.
And as I understand you're saying on your understanding that that's not required by your rules. In other words, your rules do not require the survivor of a sexual assault to have to make her allegation in the presence of the person whom she accuses as having assaulted her.
If I understand your question correctly, from what I've heard from Mr. Spink's testimony, that is not something that we require now.
It is, as a matter of fact, something that they required at the time, yes. And it's still something that's required. I think they changed it to make it so that it'll still be investigated and that person will still be disfellowshipped, whether the person accuses them or not. But it's still part of the equation. They still expect people to approach their abuser, basically.
The preface is this and the fact that it's not my field that I work with every day. Mr. Spinks and those who work.
Well, if the elders had not, if the governing body members hadn't ducked this commission this entire time, maybe they could have gotten the right person in for this. But as a member of the governing body who's from Australia, he'll do. He can answer for their crimes.
The fact that it's not my field that I work with every day. Mr. Spinks and those who work in the service department work with these matters. But that is my understanding.
Yes. And so do you accept then that that should be made clear in your documents, manuals, and instructions. In other words, that it should be made clear that a survivor of a sexual assault should not have to make her allegation in the presence of the person whom she accuses as having assaulted her.
Absolutely.
That was not the position at the time. I mean, he's just lying here. And it wasn't until 5 years later that they made any changes to the book at all, let alone the proper changes that they needed to make. They still haven't really made those.
Now, Mr. Jackson, can a branch committee publish its own manuals and guidelines in respect of judicial committee procedures for responding to allegations of child sexual abuse?
No. The answer to this is no. They have to follow the Elders Manual, which is a deeply guarded secret, and it's the same for every single elder in the entire organization. There's a big list of things that are basically just fellowshipping offenses, and you just have to follow that book, and that's it.
I would think it would be unusual for that to happen, seeing it's not my field.
It would be apostasy, and he knows it would be apostasy. They'd be disfellowshipped instantly if they tried that.
Per se, I couldn't give an inclusive answer with regard to that, but...
Yes, he can. He can tell the truth, which is it would be apostasy, it'd be heresy. It'd be against the rules. And he knows this. He's just lying here again. Wow, this thing is really starting to heat up, actually. I'm going to write this one down, too.
As far as the general principle goes, I would expect that they would get back to the service committee on it.
Well, what we see in the documents that we have that govern this issue currently is that they are documents which originate under the auspices of or with the approval of the governing body.
Right, exactly. The governing body calls all of the shots for this stuff. There is no room for movement here.
So I'm referring to... Yeah, sorry, Mr. Jackson.
Sorry, my apologies.
So I'm referring to organize to do Jehovah's will, shepherd the flock of God.
Okay, organized to do Jehovah's will is a manual for unbaptized publishers, maybe baptized publishers, I'm not sure. I got a copy of it. It used to be green. And Shepherd the Flock of God is an elder's manual that people aren't even supposed to be aware exists. The fact that he brought it up just now probably deeply unnerves the governing body member. I have every copy all the way back to like the 60s or something now.
Jehovah's will, shepherd the flock of God, and the guidelines that are published to the branch committees.
Thank you. It's a rather long question, but if I've understood it correctly, we would expect the general framework of what we do to be published as approved by the governing body. But you see, when we say published, letters are published by the local branches that indicate any variance that may need to take place with regard to those policies. So that's why I was just hesitant to say that it's all-inclusive.
But that makes no sense. He's just completely full of it.
Well, if the Australia branch, for example, was to decide that the investigative step which precedes the appointment of a judicial committee need not be done by two elders, but can in Australia be done by a woman acting on their behalf, would that be something that would be open to the Australia committee to follow?
That's a good question. Wow, that's super interesting. So one of the steps that you're supposed to take if you discover that there's CSA taking place is not to call the cops. It's instructed that if the victim wants to call the cops, they can, but the elders are not to involve the secular authorities. The first step they take is to assign two elders to investigate, to talk to the victim, to talk to the accused, and sit down in a room with both of them simultaneously where the victim can accuse the person directly to their face. That's what was in the elders book at the time. Like I said, there are a couple of updates that aren't really super relevant for this conversation in the 2020 edition, I think, or 2021. But anyways, so they're saying, is it possible for a woman to step in and do investigating instead of like the, two male elders. In my opinion, there's no reason to have any of that. Like, they shouldn't even involve any of this. Call the cops. There shouldn't be a committee that meets, judicial committee, and people investigating. No, just call the cops. Why is this a problem? Why can't they just do that? And if the guy's convicted, disfellowship him. Just like that.
Or to adopt?
Mr. Stewart, I certainly would hope that the Australia Branch Committee would get back to the Service Committee with the reasons why that's needed, and then eventually I would hope that would get to the governing body so that we could approve whatever changes are needed worldwide.
But it may be that the...
Right, so they cannot make those changes themselves. They have to ask the governing body. That's what this was. And the answer is women are not allowed to have any role in decision-making or anything at all in this organization.
Whatever changes are needed worldwide.
But it may be that the branch committee in Australia has a different view on these matters than the branch committee in some other country. We'll take one close to home, New Zealand, for example. Well, let me do one further afield anywhere, if you like. The Philippines may take a different view. Is there space for the branch committees to have different investigative procedures in different parts of the world?
The answer is no.
To answer your question, the answer is yes.
Wow, dude. This is a flat-out lie. I cannot believe this dude is just blatantly lying to these people's faces. He just said the answer is no, effectively. I mean, it was in a veiled way, but that's what he said. And then he says the answer is yes. This is crazy. I cannot believe he was so blatant with that lie. Seriously. That's nuts. Hold on, let me see. 102.30. I got to write this one down, too. This is crazy. Took an oath to Jehovah God, put his hand on the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures, and swore to God to tell the truth in this hearing, and then lied to their faces under oath.
To answer your question, the answer is yes, that is possible, but if the reason for doing so is to avoid trauma, then that's something the governing body is interested in. We want to see how we can encourage all the countries to avoid that.
So, okay, he's saying, yeah, I like this idea, actually. We should appoint women to investigate these matters of CSA. Like, they just suggested something. Now, we have the benefit of hindsight, right? We can look back and tell, did they implement this change? He just said, I love this idea. This is a fantastic idea. We should be doing this more. Did he implement it? Of course not. It was a lie the whole time. He lied under oath.
But if it's a matter of technicality that they need to do it a certain way, then yes, we would expect they would at least notify us, and there could be differences.
Mr. Jackson, is there any biblical impediment to a woman being appointed to investigate an allegation?
There is.
No, there isn't.
A woman being appointed to investigate an allegation?
There is no biblical impediment to a woman being involved with the investigation.
Of course, he believes that there is. Women should have no role in any kind of administrative anything. The best they can do is go knock on doors full time as a pioneer. That's as high as they can get in the organization. He's just lying here too, just blatant, bald-faced lie.
In fact, I think... Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
You know, you would think that if he really believed this, in the intervening 8 years or so, which is roughly how long it's been since this came out, those changes would be implemented. Have they been? No. Of course they haven't.
Your Honor.
No, you continue.
And I think that's one of the benefits of the Royal Commission, as what has been brought to light, is that certainly it is good for a woman to be involved.
Oh, there you go. Put a puff in their petticoat. That's why this Royal Commission is good, because you're bringing ideas to light that we can implement in our everyday life. No, it's completely made up, dude. They never implemented any of this. This is all a blatant lie. After swearing on the Bible that he would tell the truth, he's lying.
Particularly some of these sensitive areas. But if I could just mention, many of our publications are very broad in aspect. We're not just talking about this one aspect of child abuse, which is a horrific crime, but it can also, the same principles are used for other sins such as drunkenness and other things the Bible mentions. But in this sensitive area, yes, I think the Commission has clearly shown that it would be good for women to be involved.
And come to find out, they never did involve women. Isn't that interesting how that works? They were lying to them the entire time. See, this is why it's valuable to like go back and examine this in retrospect and see like how they framed things and what they believe and all that stuff. Because we can see when they were simply lying all these years later.
It's clearly shown that it would be good for women to be involved.
Is there any biblical impediment to a determination, a judicial determination, being made by a body which includes women?
Oh, interesting. So is he saying, is there any like biblical basis to exclude women from judicial committees, like a committee that would disfellowship somebody, for example? And the answer is no. It says they're not allowed to teach. Now, judicial committees are not teaching. They are administrating, I guess. They are deciding if somebody should be banned or whatever. It's a little bit different, it seems to me, but okay.
Although the elders thereafter may respond in terms of the as the decision maker in relation to what happens to someone after a decision has been made as to the truth or not of an allegation.
So can they be on judicial committees is the question here.
That's a good question. Could I just mention first, Your Honour, something, please bear with me on this. The judicial system that Jehovah's Witnesses use is not in competition with the criminal justice system. We respect that, and we feel that that's something that the community needs to make use of.
Well, that's something they say on paper, but when it all boils down to it, Jehovah's Witnesses have always had an interest in replacing the secular government because they believe at some point in the near future, any 5 minutes now, there's going to be a time when the secular governments fall. And when that time comes, they're going to have to step in and take control of everything for their people. They're going to have to step in and protect their people from blah, 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 and their people are it's going to be their own government. They've been trying to form their own government since the beginning. They've always tried to create their own government. And as a result, they don't involve secular authorities to any degree if possible, ever. That's really the core issue here. They believe it's wrong to involve secular authorities in anything under any circumstances, and that's why it doesn't specifically instruct elders in their elders' handbook to call the cops if somebody does something wrong. They should be dealing with it directly, just them. That's the problem here.
But also, if I can just highlight, any victim is not viewed as someone that needs to stand before a judicial committee. They did not do anything wrong.
No, but they have to approach the judicial committee and communicate with them and face the accused directly, according to the Elders' Handbook at this time.
The ones that have been victimized, they need the help. Now, to answer your question directly, women can be involved in this very sensitive area, but...
No, they can't. It's banned. They're not allowed to be involved in any way, shape, or form, ever. And they still aren't 8 years later. This is just a lie.
Biblically speaking, the role of judges in the congregation, it lays with men. That's what the Bible says.
There you go. Now he's telling the truth about the judicial committee. And what evidence does he have to back this up? The fact that at no point in the Bible were women judges. Not that it specifically condemns it, but that women were just simply not judges in the Old Testament. It doesn't condemn it, actually. And we can see a clear example of how it would be helpful in this case for women to be on judicial committees. But because it wasn't actively in the Old Testament, he's going to ignore it completely. It's the same logic they use to back up their belief about birthdays. You know, if you don't celebrate birthdays because there aren't any examples of, you know, a good birthday party, basically. Every birthday party in the Bible just sucked. Like, it wasn't fun. Somebody lost a head. And that's their justification. Though they completely ignore that logic when it comes to dogs in the Bible, they're applying it to women because that's convenient for them, and they're applying it to birthdays because, again, convenient. It's a convenient way of isolating their members from the rest of society so that they have one less cultural connection to everybody else.
Of judges in the congregation, it lays with men. That's what the Bible says, and that's what we endeavour to follow.
Can you give me the reference for that?
Oh, I love it.
Yes. In the scriptures,
that is judges being only men. Not elders, but judges being only men.
Okay, I would have to check it. I think Deuteronomy is one of them. But
I don't deny that they had, like, judges in the Old Testament that were men, but that doesn't say that only men are allowed to be judges. It says, like, that, you know, judges were by and large made up of men. Distinct difference to be had there.
But with regard to 1 Timothy chapter 3, 1 Timothy chapter 3.
He's repeating it the same way he does when he gives a talk. That's how you're supposed to do it when you talk about, like, when you're up there at the lectern giving a talk or whatever, you give them a second to turn to the page, even though you had a bookmark in it, because it takes a second to flip there.
And I'm sure Your Honour, you're very familiar with this. In verse 1, the statement is trustworthy. If a man is reaching out to be an overseer, he is desirous of a fine work. The overseer should therefore be irreprehensible, a husband of one wife, moderate in habits, sound in mind, orderly, hospitable, qualified to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but reasonable, not quarrelsome.
Wow, that's actually really interesting. You know what? I didn't realize this, but is being married a qualification for being an elder? It's not a qualification for being a ministerial servant. I know that for sure. That's like one step below being an elder. It's like you're on your way to being an elder. But is it a requirement for being an elder? That's interesting.
Not a drunkard, not violent, but reasonable, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. A man presiding over his own.
What about, I wonder if it's allowed for an elder to, I know that you know, a lover of money is banned, but can they be a lover of your mom?
Reasonable, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. A man presiding over his own household in a fine manner, having his children in subjection with all seriousness. In biblical times, the same expression that is used for elder is also used for older man. And when we're translating, of course, that is my field, sometimes it is hard to decide whether it means elder as in a position or older man. But definitely when it speaks of judges at the gates in Israel, we're talking about older men. But I apologize, Your Honour, seeing you asked this question, I cannot give you the exact scriptural reference, but we'll be happy to do that.
We would appreciate it, because one possible modification to meet this issue of the lack of women as judges of allegations brought forward by women against men may be a modification of your process to include women in the judicial determination step. You understand?
So he's saying that could be a solution to this problem, partly. It would at least contribute to the correction, having women, you know, adjudicate issues in the congregation from time to time, especially if it's in, like, cases of CSA. That'd be a lot better. I agree.
I do understand, Your Honour, and we will make sure you get those references.
And can you understand how...
They never did get those references, because they don't exist.
I understand, Your Honour, and we will make sure you get those references.
And can you understand how a young woman, any woman might feel when allegations which she makes of having been sexually assaulted by a male are determined exclusively by men?
In the context of a police station, I can understand that, Your Honour, but please, may I also mention the role of these elders. They are friends of those in the congregation. Their role is to shepherd, help, care for. And so although perhaps a young person may feel that way, and we would do everything we can within the Bible parameters to make sure that that is eased so that a person isn't put in that very difficult situation.
But they don't seem to understand what this is all about. They don't seem to understand how hard it is to come forward about something like this in the first place. And for an 8-year-old girl to have to come forward about this to a bunch of old men, maybe who look just like the attacker, is wrong. It's just wrong. It's morally wrong. They don't seem to get that. They don't seem to, the dots aren't connecting for them. And obviously the dots never did connect because to this day, they haven't made that change.
But still, ultimately, the decision, maybe without that person, would be made. And the decision is not concerning the criminality. That is the criminal system. The decision is concerning the spiritual cleanliness of our congregation and the rehabilitation of those that commit sins.
That's to concentrate on the abuser. But what I'm talking about is the position of the person who's been abused. Do you understand?
I do understand that.
So all that you've just said is talking about it from only one perspective, you see?
Mm-hmm. So from the other perspective, with a victim, the main thing for us is helping, supporting, and guiding, and women will be involved with that. You see.
But they aren't. They never were, and they never corrected that problem. It's still, to this day, a problem.
The Judicial Committee is not judging the victim. The elders in the congregation and the women in the congregation have the obligation to give full support to any victim.
Well, that may be so, but the point I was seeking to have you address was, can you understand how a woman might feel when allegations which she brings forward against a man in the congregation are considered and judged entirely by men?
Obviously I'm not a woman, so I wouldn't like to speak on their behalf, but the two of us, I'm sure, could understand from what has been expressed and believe that perhaps there would be a hesitancy there.
And can I add this to the question, because it's one of the factual circumstances we face in this hearing. Can you understand the circumstance for a woman who brings an allegation against an elder?
That would be a tough situation, absolutely.
Who's a friend of the others who must judge the truth or otherwise of the allegation. Can you understand how that person must feel?
I can try to understand it, Your Honour, yes. But again, could I ask, and again, this is not my field of activity, but as far as I understand, we have a process in place whereby a neutral member, like a circuit overseer, will be involved with such a sensitive case.
Bullshit. Okay, the circuit overseer visits once every few months, and they give a single talk, maybe 2 talks every 6 weeks or so, and they don't deal with individual issues like this. Circuit overseers deal with elder deletion and stuff like that. Like, this is a completely made-up answer, and he knows it is. This is not the place of a circuit overseer. This is standard Jehovah's Witness business. He's just lying here, and he knows it.
It would be the case, would it not, that even a circuit overseer is going to know an elder well?
Yeah, they're going to have a personal relationship with these elders, absolutely. Because, like I said, they're in charge of deletion or appointing an elder.
They should be familiar, but they also know the victim well.
No, they don't. They don't know the people in the congregation almost at all. They deal very closely with the elders. And they make a habit of taking the young people out in service with them when they visit once every 6 weeks to try to give them some encouragement. They're like celebrities within Jehovah's Witness circles, right? The circuit overseers are like really high up in the organization and represent the ultimate form of, like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here. The ultimate form of spirituality. They deal with elders directly, and that's it.
You see, it's not taking into consideration the spiritual responsibility. You see, these elders are not paid to do their job. They do it because of love and concern and wanting to shepherd.
No, because of brainwashing, but okay.
They're not paid to do their job. They do it because of love and concern and wanting to shepherd the flock. And so I think what we're missing is the spiritual element to this whole thing, where people are comfortable talking to one another.
Well, I don't know whether you heard the evidence of the survivors here. Did you hear that evidence?
No, unfortunately, that was a bad time for me caring for my father. I apologise. But I will look forward to hearing a summary of it.
Right, he'll look forward to hearing a summary. I bet, totally. Listening to what the survivors had to say is kind of probably considered apostasy or heresy. Like, any other Jehovah's Witness is banned from hearing them out. They're not allowed to listen to this stuff because they are in opposition to the governing body or the way that things currently run. If you oppose the way things run right now, then you're an apostate and you're evil and you're just going to die in Armageddon, be annihilated.
Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Yes, because, Mr. Jackson, for example, the elders who hear these allegations, one of the things they have to do is to measure the credibility of the person who says that she suffered abuse. Is that not right?
Yes, as a prosecutor would also measure the evidence that he does before he goes to a case.
Well, not so much the prosecutor. Perhaps you're thinking of the judge.
Sorry, no. If I understand correct, well, I'm going way out of my field because I'm not a lawyer, but I thought any case that...
Okay, he kind of stuck his foot in his mouth on that one, didn't he? They're supposed to be judges, right? Not prosecutors. Like, it's a judicial committee. They're determining if this person is telling the truth or not. They're not prosecuting this victim.
Well, I'm going way out of my field because I'm not a lawyer, but I thought any case that would go to the police and then brought to the prosecution, you'd have to at least establish there was some validity. Yes, maybe that's not the case in Australia.
Well, the point is this, Mr. Jackson, isn't it, that you've appreciated, I think, that an elderly man may be in a difficult position to understand just how a young woman, for example, making an accusation or an allegation of child sexual abuse feels in having to make that allegation.
That is true, but at the same time, perhaps someone who's never experienced the trauma that these victims have felt, even a woman may find that very hard as well, because it's such a personal experience.
But you'll accept, I'm sure, that in many instances where a woman or young woman makes such an allegation, she would feel a lot more comfortable having to make the allegation and explain the circumstances.
Oh, absolutely. To a woman, yeah, 100%. They shouldn't have to explain the allegations or confront the accused or any of that stuff. Like, this is so ass backwards, all of it.
To another woman.
I can't say that I would give a comment on that, Mr. Stewart, because you see, again, it takes away the consideration of the relationships in our congregations. It's not like your churches where people just go to church and don't talk to one another.
Does he think people don't talk to each other in churches? Are you kidding me? Yeah, churches on the outside, they suck. They don't even know each other. They just come to church and then they sit in the pews. They don't even listen to anything being said. It's pointless.
Their congregations do become familiar, and there can be a friendship. So I agree at the point you're trying to get at, we need to know what the victim is comfortable in doing with regard to who they speak to.
Well, you gave us a scripture, 1 Timothy 3 verse 1, which as I understood it was the authority for the principle that, as it's put there, an overseer, but in, I think, modern language, an elder, must be a man. Is that right?
That's correct.
And is there a scriptural reference, and perhaps this is the one you said you'd need to come back to us on, is there a scriptural reference which says that the investigation of allegations of serious misconduct must be done by an elder?
That's super interesting, the point that he's making here. So, is there anything in the Bible that says that the investigations should be done by elders specifically rather than somebody else? Can't it be a woman? The answer is no. There's nothing in the Bible that says it can't be a woman.
If I could just clarify your question a little, Mr. Stewart. You see, what I think you've heard in the Commission is that we have said that women can be involved in all these various aspects leading up to the actual decision-making, whether...
What aspects? What things would women be involved in other than the decision-making? The answer is nothing. There's nothing that women could be involved in leading up to the decision. This is completely made up.
Whether or not someone is spiritually qualified to remain in the congregation. So just that one aspect, the actual judicial committee itself, is where we believe that men would be involved.
Well, Mr. Jackson, that's the question I was putting to you, you see. I was wondering whether you could have a structure which meant that the judicial decision as to whether or not the allegation was true could be determined by a body capable of having women represented on it, and that body's decision would then be taken to the elders in relation to decisions to disfellowship. Do you understand?
I understand, Your Honour.
Well, is it possible to make that change?
It is possible to make sure that elders are fully aware of the whole story. But for women to be elders in the congregation, that is not possible.
No, Mr. Jackson, I wasn't asking you that. I was asking you to consider. Sorry. I was asking you to consider whether the process may involve a determination which we outside the church would call a judicial determination. That is the allegation true or false? And then that decision having been made, the elders would then make a decision as to the consequence being.
So can you involve women in the process at any point, anywhere? And the answer is no. And we know that because we have the benefit of hindsight. They did not make that change. Women are not involved in the process anywhere along the line at any point 8 years later. So the answer is no, right?
Having been made, the elders would then make a decision as to the consequence, being disfellowship or otherwise. Do you understand?
I do understand.
Could women be involved in the determination of whether or not the allegation is true?
Well, Your Honour, if I could say, I think they already are involved.
No, they're not.
In the decision, Mr. Jackson. Please address my question.
Okay. Yes, well, please, could I just use an example? If an underage child it says that something has happened, and then two women are involved with helping that person, surely they have to decide whether or not the facts are true and present those to the elders. Otherwise, how would the elders know what the facts are?
Mr. Jackson, you're not dealing with my question.
Dude, I love it. They hold his feet to the fire, right?
I'm sorry, I apologise.
Would you like me to put it again? Would you like me to put it again?
If you would, please.
Your process at the moment has a judicial determination which is made by the elders. And that's the point at which a decision is made as to whether the allegation is true or false. Do you understand that?
Mm-hmm.
You do?
I do understand that, Your Honour.
Is it possible for the process to be modified so that that decision can be made by a body which could include women, that is, the decision as to whether or not the allegation is true or false.
The answer is no. The answer is no. Women are not allowed to be involved to any degree at all, and they never made that change, obviously. The answer is no to this question. He could just say no.
Made by a body which could include women, and that decision would thereafter be acted upon and a decision made as to whether or not to disfellowship by the elders. Do you understand?
I do understand, and I apologise, Your Honour, for not answering directly. I didn't understand fully what you were saying.
Oh, he understood.
The answer, Your Honour, is...
The answer is no. Women cannot be involved.
Such a situation would be worthy of us considering and doing research and checking the scriptures.
What a cop-out.
Yes, the possibility of considering that is there.
No, it wasn't. It was never there. The possibility was never there. And it never happened. It's just a blatant, flat-out lie again.
Thank you, and I apologise again.
Mr. Jackson, I'd like to refer you to Shepherd the Flock of God, which is...
That's their internal elders manual. People aren't even supposed to know about this. Women aren't, like, even wives of elders, nothing is hidden between, elders and their wives except this book. You're not allowed to talk to your wife about it. It's never supposed to be in the same room as her if it's outside of a locked case. That's why Jehovah's Witnesses carry briefcases. Because their wives, their family members, and no one is supposed to know this book exists. And we have a copy of it, thanks to some elders who defected, basically.
Which is tab 120 at page 71, ringtail 72. Now, this is the manual for elders, and it's been...
He's probably really disturbed by the fact that they know about this book.
Applicable since, as I understand it, 2010, is that right?
Yeah, this is the 2010 edition. Again, they came out with another edition in 2020, I think, maybe. And the 2020 edition didn't really update anything worth even mentioning, honestly.
This is, yes, that appears to be the case.
And would it be the case that this manual came through the processes of the writing committee?
This manual would have been prepared with the help of the service departments.
Oh my God, dude. I cannot believe that they're actually asking him about this manual. This is fantastic. I love it.